In today's video, we will learn about Anne-Elisabeth Hagen, the wife of the Norwegian millionaire Tom Hagen, an investor and real estate mogul. October 31st, 2018 was the last time Anne-Elisabeth was seen alive before vanishing forever. The only clue left behind was a note providing instructions to transfer 9 million euros in cryptocurrency to a certain bank account. And if that doesn't take place, it threatens that Anne-Elisabeth will be killed during an online live feed. This is a case with so much drama that it might as well be straight out of a movie. It shook the otherwise oh so quaint Norway to the core. Anne-Elisabeth and Tom Hagen married very early, at 19 years old. That was before Tom came into money. He wasn't yet one of the 200 richest men in Norway. But because neither of them was born wealthy, they both stayed grounded and kept on leading a normal life. They continued staying in the safe but not very upscale neighborhood where the house that they purchased in their 20s was located in. Tom didn't drive a sports car, but instead a simple Citroen. They were parents and grandparents, and outsiders report that one would have never guessed that the two were multi-millionaires. This right here was their house, a middle-class home that was not very flashy. And as opposed to many others with that kind of money, the Hagens stayed away from any security measures and decided to live a free life instead. The last fact is often mentioned as the reason why it was possible to target Anne-Elisabeth in the first place. But first things first, let's start in July 2018. This was the month when Dagens Næringsliv, a Norwegian business magazine, published an article about Tom Hagen and the 174 million Norwegian crowns that the businessman had made in 2017. The police are speculating that it was the article that brought attention to Tom Hagen to begin with, and that it set off the events that took place on October 31st, 2018. At 9 AM, Tom Hagen left his house and went to work. 10 to 15 minutes later, he arrived there. At 9:14, Anne-Elisabeth had a phone conversation with a family member. In the beginning, the press wrote that this family member was her husband Tom, but after a certain point in time, the different magazines only reported the first version. Why that is, nobody knows. But if it was her husband that she spoke to, then it is safe to assume that they must have talked on the phone right after he arrived to work. At 9:48, Anne-Elisabeth's neighbor and an electrician, Tom Skansen, called her because she asked him a few weeks ago if he could exchange a few lights in her kitchen. However, she didn't answer her cell phone. This is how we can figure that the conversation with her family member didn't last any longer than 34 minutes. For some reason, probably because he knew that she was usually available or at home around this time, Tommy Skansen thought that it was strange that she was not picking up, but he didn't investigate. Throughout the day, there were other people who were calling Anne-Elisabeth, but the last person who actually heard from her was the family member or her husband at 9:14. At 1:30 PM, Tom Hagen returns home, earlier than usual. Immediately he can tell that something is wrong. Several items that belong to Anne-Elisabeth are laying on the chair next to the front door. He enters the house and discovers a long letter, written in broken Norwegian. He reads it immediately. The letter turns out to be a ransom note, so he comes to the conclusion that his wife isn't there because she has been kidnapped. The letter's author asks for 9 million euros in the cryptocurrency Monero, and he threatens that if the money is not transferred to a certain account, then Tom's wife will be murdered during an online live feed. I just called this an account to make it easier. The correct term is actually wallet. This is what you call the accounts associated with cryptocurrency through which you can send and receive money. However, you need private and public keys to access them. The advantage compared to bank accounts is that the owners of wallets are difficult or even impossible to track. That's the reason why the letter contained a pretty detailed description of how to transfer the money. Furthermore, the abductors also write that they're watching Tom in his house, and that the same thing will happen if he contacts the police. After thinking about it long and hard, he finally decides to alarm the police after all. He calls them at 2:07 p.m. and arranges a secret meeting close to a gas station only a short time later. November. Because of the threats in the letter stating that Anne-Elisabeth will be killed if the police finds out about it, the authorities have to carefully work in the background to avoid putting her life in danger. At that time, everyone assumed that she was still alive. That wasn't very easy, especially since the police had to investigate the crime scene and collect evidence in order to find out more information about the perpetrators. Working on the case were Kripos, Norway's National Criminal Investigation Service, and Økokrim, Norway's investigative unit for business crimes. At the house, the investigators located traces of blood belonging to Anne-Elisabeth, a footprint, and some cable ties. However, it was hard to tell if the blood stemmed from the day of her disappearance or a different one, because the amount of blood located at the scene wasn't uncommon for a household. This probably means that they didn't find much blood. At this time, nobody knew that something had happened. Not the neighbors, nor the people working with or for Tom Hagen. Tom continued going to work and was described as antisocial and a wreck. Neighbors were told that Anne-Elisabeth was gone, and even family members were left in the dark. At the end of November, however, news got out that something was wrong and that she had been abducted. But people were told not to say anything about the case and Anne-Elisabeth kidnapping. The same was asked of the media, which had also found out about the circumstances in the meantime. December. The investigation is still kept a secret and the public is not given any information. January 9th, 2019. The police is calling in a press conference and finally authorizes the Norwegian media to talk about the case and publish articles about Anne-Elisabeth's disappearance. At that time, she was already 10 weeks missing. The public finds out what has happened to her, or should I say, what the investigations have uncovered so far. With other words, not much. Only that she was probably kidnapped and that the kidnappers asked for ransom. The police probably decided to involve the public and ignore the kidnappers' threats because they assumed that Anne-Elisabeth was no longer alive at that time. Furthermore, they published the following recordings. You can see a man at Tom Hagen's place of work around 7:36 a.m. on the morning of the crime. He goes towards the parking lot, and when he reaches a certain spot he stops, then turns around abruptly and goes back until he disappears in the angle of the camera that he came from. Only 24 minutes later, at 8 a.m., another man is seen walking the same way to the parking lot. He is observed by a person on the bicycle that later on contacts the police. Unfortunately, the man on the bike was unable to identify the guy, since his face was mainly covered by a hood that he was wearing. The police assumes that the two men checked whether or not Tom Hagen's car was already in the company's parking lot in order to be able to tell when the abduction could take place. If the two men really kept an eye out for this, then we now know that this plot was not just executed by a single person, but instead a group consisting of more than two people that are responsible for the kidnapping. January 16th. The Hagen family receives a message by a person or a group of people that claim to have Anne-Elisabeth in captivity. They received this message via cryptocurrency. This time it is Bitcoin. How exactly that works I haven't quite understood yet, but if anyone is watching who is well versed in this topic, then I would appreciate if they could leave an explanation in the comments that even a normal person can understand. Because of the way the message is being transmitted, the investigators believe this information could be credible. January 27th. The communication with the kidnappers continues. However, critics point out that the abductors weren't yet communicating with the family in the beginning when the case wasn't yet known to the public. But now that the case is known, the kidnappers make contact. The critics assume that those who have contacted the family aren't Anne-Elisabeth kidnappers, but instead other criminals that saw a chance in the tragedy to get their hands on a lot of money. Besides the understandably critical voices, there are also wild speculations started by internet users in different forums. What enemies did the Hagens have? Who had a reason to do something to Anne-Elisabeth? Could it have been Tom Hagen himself? February 2019. The police advises the family not to pay the ransom unless they have proof that the kidnappers are real and Anne-Elisabeth is still alive. In the beginning, the family has high hopes to finally find out more, because there's communication, but it stops soon after and they are back where they started. And the police investigation is also stalling, even though they question a lot of people, including Tom Hagen's business partners and employees. April. After a long and cold Norwegian winter, and after defrosting a lake close to the Hagen's house, investigators are searching it with specially trained dogs. Whether or not they found anything during this search is unknown. If they did, then most likely only little clues, but not Anne-Elisabeth's body. This would be something they would have certainly told the public. May. The family attempts to make contact with the kidnappers on their own, since they have not heard anything from them since January 27th. But once again, they do not receive a response. June. The investigation takes a 180-degree turn. The police now assumes that Anne-Elisabeth has been murdered and that the letter was planted as a means of distraction. Furthermore, they retract their statement that the two men seen on the security footage have to be identified to help further the case. Why they suddenly don't think that they have anything to do with the case is not shared with the public at that time. July 8th. The family lawyer, Sven Holden, receives an email from the darknet. It is written in Norwegian, and the writing is reminiscent of the initial note, which leads to believe that it could stem from the same person. Sven claims that this email contains information only the kidnapper, or should I say murder, of Anne-Elisabeth could know. The author once again requests that the family makes the money transfer if they want to receive proof that Anne-Elisabeth is still alive. After having his back against the wall for several months, Tom Hagen decides to transfer the 1.3 million euros in cryptocurrency to the account in question. Some time goes by, but he doesn't receive an answer. August. The shoe print found in the house is made available to investigators and authorities across Europe. The German police comes up with the fact that it belongs to Sprog's shoe brand and is a shoe size of 45. This shoe is sold by Sparkjob, the Norwegian equivalent of H&M. The police asked the public for help and asked anyone who has bought the shoes to contact the authorities. September. The cable ties that had initially been located at the crime scene are analyzed, and the police come to the conclusion that they were made in China and sold by the company Baltema in Norway. The problem with these conclusions is that Sparkjob and Baltema are stores comparable to H&M and Hornbach in Germany, which means that these businesses are frequented by the general public. October. The police figures out where the envelope and paper that the ransom note was written on came from, a business located in the same category as the other two stores, namely from a chain store named Claes Olsen. The only thing that connects the three stores to the case of Anne-Elisabeth is the fact that all three of them have a location in Romerike, the area where Tom and Anne-Elisabeth have their house. This fact points investigators into a direction that they had their eye on for a while already. In the following month, the case went colder and colder. Though it was often referenced in the news, there were no new developments. Only about a few months ago, in April 2020, the police had gathered enough evidence that they were able to manifest their suspicions in form of an arrest. Tom Hagen was arrested on Tuesday morning, April 28th, for murder and complicity in the killing of his wife, Anne-Elisabeth Hagen. The police chief said that the case was now entering a new phase, but it was still uncertain, as there were several unanswered questions that the police were supposedly working on every day. However, according to him, the arrest was a result of the overall evidence so far. What it was that they considered overall evidence has not been disclosed to the public, With the exception of the facts that have already been mentioned in this video, the police made the following statement to the press: "We won't comment the outcome. There are speculations that Anne-Elisabeth was killed in the bathroom of the mutual house. This is based on the observation that the police removed the door, the toilet seat and the lid from the house to examine it closer." Tom Hagen denies any wrongdoing and maintains his innocence. He has a defiant attitude towards the investigation and finds the outcome incomprehensible. The police believes that there never was a kidnapping and that the negotiations were fake. This would mean that the assumption that the letter was meant to be a distraction to lead investigators down the wrong road was correct, which was confirmed through further investigations. And some statements regarding the couple's marriage are beginning to shed more and more light on the truth. It was said that the marriage had gotten worse and worse over the last few years, and that the two were arguing more and more. Furthermore, Anne-Elisabeth allegedly stated on more than one occasion that she was looking to get divorced from her husband. On top of it, Tom Hagen supposedly dated another woman while his wife was missing, and the alleged kidnapping was in full swing. The last two statements are mere speculations, since they do not stem from reliable sources. If Tom Hagen was in fact involved in his wife's murder, it appears to be likely that he did not do the deed himself. It is believed that he was the initiator for a contract killing. He may have even come up with a distraction regarding the ransom note and the cryptocurrency in order to hit two birds with one stone. For one, the letter in broken Norwegian was able to get the attention off of him and make investigators look for an unrelated and unidentified third party, a person that did in fact exist but was in cahoots with Tom as they have been hired by him. And since the account, or the wallet as it is called, can't be traced, it may in fact belong to the murderer. And this is the second bird. Tom makes the payment for the killing to the wallet and looks like a good Samaritan and a great husband at the same time. A brilliant move, however, the intelligent and ruthless businessman still got outsmarted by the responsible investigators. And this brings us to the end of today's video. If I hear any news in this case, then I will keep you posted. What are your thoughts about this case? I, from my part, was extremely fascinated by the story. I simply cannot wrap my head around the fact that you can live with your partner for 40 years and then, seemingly for money reason, decided to get rid of them. In case I missed any important details, feel free to leave me a comment. If you liked this video, give me a like or subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much in advance. Thank you very much for watching, have a good night and see you next time.